All right, so Apple just had their second product event for this month, and lo and behold, it's the new MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch models that we've all been waiting so desperately for. Now, there's a lot to unpack, and I just wanted to share my quick thoughts about overall the new models and how they stand in terms of what I would like in my upgrades, and probably what you would like in your upgrades. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, first and foremostly, let's talk about the design, because I think that's the major change here. And one of the greatest things I think about the new models in particular is the fact that it now finally includes an SD card slot. And I think by Apple introducing this, hopefully many other manufacturers would also see that SD card slots are the bread and butter of many working professionals. Certainly I use it a lot for my video and photo editing content. And I think if you are going to label something as being a pro model for professionals, an SD card slot is a must. So glad that that's on board. Interestingly enough, the second most anticipated port, I would say, on both the 14-inch and 16-inch models is the MagSafe charging port. And also, in addition to that, Apple has included 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports that are also charging capable, one on the left-hand side and 2 on the right-hand side. And just for reference, the MagSafe is on the left-hand side as per usual. So that means you have a variety of ports that you can charge through and on both sides of the laptop, which is great. Interestingly enough, I think as well, on the order specifications here, the 14-inch model comes with 2 varieties of power adapters. The first one being a 67 watt and the second one being a 96 watt. So one for probably just normal charging and the other one for fast charging. Whereas the 16-inch model comes with a 140 watt USB-C power adapter. The other important aspect of the design that I really want to talk about now is the screen, and it's looking pretty good, guys. So essentially, they've shrunken the bezels, but the main thing is with that shrunken bezel, you have now a notch at the top, which I don't particularly mind because they've integrated that aspect, that design element with the top bar of macOS. That's a nice design element, and particularly in dark mode, I can imagine that that will just seemingly blend into the notch that is there. What I found interesting was that they also upgraded the webcam to a 1080p FaceTime HD camera, which is amazing. That's very good, and I hope many other manufacturers follow that suit. I guess the main thing that I'm excited about with these displays is the fact that ProMotion is now integrated and that it's a variable refresh rate. So I think when looking at the presentation, it looked like it was ramping down to about 20 hertz all the way up to 120 hertz, and that should refresh accordingly to the motion that it's seeing on the screen. And a nice touch as well that Apple have included is that you can set or preset the refresh rate of the display if you want to lock it into, say, 60 hertz or 30 hertz. God knows why you would want to do 30 hertz, but so that's a nice touch. So one last exciting upgrade to the screen that I wanted to quickly touch on was the fact that the brightness has been increased. So we're getting about 1,000 nits of sustained brightness on these new models and 1,600 nits on peak brightness, which presumably would be in HDR mode. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects battery life, because that alongside the ProMotion technology of adaptive refresh rate may balance out somewhat. And when we look at kind of the specifications of battery on Apple's website, what we're seeing is that in terms of wireless web browsing, it's a significant kind of downgrade from the 13-inch M1 MacBook. So we're getting kind of 6 hours less wireless web browsing on the 14-inch model, 3 hours less on the 16-inch model. And when it comes to Apple TV movie playback, the downgrade isn't as substantial on the 14-inch model. We're getting 3 hours less, and that's probably as a result of the adaptive refresh rate, with the 16-inch model actually having an hour more than the M1 MacBook 13. So I think presumably if your content is mainly just watching TV shows and things that are relatively static, then you're not going to see as much of a battery hit. Whereas if you're doing a lot of moving about of UI elements, scrolling a lot, things that will ramp up that refresh rate, then presumably you're going to get poorer performance in terms of battery life compared to the 13-inch model. So bear that in mind. That's really something important to note. Now, last thing about the design that I forgot to quickly mention was the size and weight. We're actually seeing that the 14-inch model is only 200 grams heavier than M1 MacBook 13, which is pretty impressive. In terms of depth, it's the exact same height. If not, it even specifies that it's 0.01 centimeters thinner than that of the M1 13-inch, which is kind of weird. The other thing is that the height of the 16-inch model, it's only 0.1 centimeters thicker than that of really the 13-inch model, which is, you know, these are going to be crazy slim, densely packed MacBooks, and I feel like in the hand it'll be quite nice to use. Oh, the other thing about the design element is the keyboard. They've gotten rid of the touch bar. They've had this black kind of matte background to the keyboard deck. It's going to be a great aesthetic change, I think, and particularly the functionality of physical function row keys. That's going to be great. And I loved the Apple presentation on it. I think they finally succumbed to the fact that no one really liked touch bar, and they quickly glanced over the fact that they've changed the function row key set from touch bar to actual physical keys. That was pretty funny. And so let's talk now about performance and these new M1 Pro and M1 Max chipsets. I think the main thing and the main take-home message for me is that the CPU upgrades are fairly minimal when we're talking about both of these new models compared to the M1 model. I think we're so used to that system on a chip type architecture, and the fact that that's going to provide a substantial performance gains, it kind of dulls this new chipset a little bit. Because the CPU itself is only 2 cores more than that of the 8-core CPU M1. And so if you do a lot of programming that requires CPU performance, these new chipsets, they're not the best upgrade, and they're fairly minimal compared to the GPU upgrades, because we're getting a doubling of the cores of the GPUs in the M1 Pro and a quadrupling of the cores in the GPUs in M1 Max. So that's 16 cores and 32 cores respectively. That's going to be great for things that require GPU performance, sometimes video 3D rendering. It would have been great for gaming, but unfortunately AAA titles aren't really available on macOS. Hopefully these upgrades to M1 Pro and M1 Max will push forward developers to try and get those AAA titles onto macOS. That would be fantastic. And then the other thing to quickly mention is the M1 Pro starts at a base of 16 gigabytes of memory, and that can be upgraded to 32 gigabytes. The M1 Max starts at a base of 32 gigabytes and can be upgraded to 64 gigabytes of memory. So we have more kind of options for RAM specifications. And storage-wise, both of these chipsets can go up to 8 terabytes of storage, which is a welcome change from the 2 terabyte max SSD storage you could get on the M1 models. Now, for me personally, it's not that substantial of an upgrade, because I would be more than happy with just the M1 chipset in this new upgraded 14-inch model. But obviously this is designed for professionals, and so the GPU upgrades are substantial, and if that's something that you're looking for, well, Apple is here to answer your call. Now, I wanted to quickly touch on pricing very, very briefly. The 14-inch model here starts at a base of 2,999 Australian dollars. That's up from 1,899 on the 13-inch M1 Pro model. You're getting, for that, the new M1 Pro architecture. You get 512 gigabytes of SSD as opposed to 256 gigabytes on the base M1 Pro model. And you get 16 gigabytes of RAM as opposed to 8 gigabytes of RAM. So there are some performance upgrades, but you're paying a lot more for mainly the design. And when we're looking at the 16-inch model, the base model comes with M1 Pro, similar configuration to that of the 14-inch in terms of performance, but obviously with the larger design. So, the other thing, audio. So they've now integrated a 6-speaker sound system on both 14-inch and 16-inch models, which is incredible. Usually I would suspect the 16-inch model would have kind of a more upgraded sound system compared to the 14-inch model, but they've included them both, which is great. So you have now some woofers to help increase kind of the depth of sound. They've included kind of that ability for spatial audio to be played through the speakers as well, which is kind of interesting. It'll be good to see what that's like in kind of real life, as opposed to them just saying, oh, look at this, there's spatial audio now. They've also included that 3 mic array that we've seen in Apple's previous M1 kind of MacBook Pro 13-inch models. So again, a nice upgrade for people who are FaceTiming or using Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams. That's all very well and good to have. Though I think I will still be sticking to a set of studio speakers or a nice set of high fidelity headphones for really precise audio quality work. Now, I think that's about it. So would I get the 14-inch model or the 16-inch model? I would probably go the 14-inch model for the size and weight, but I think overall the main upgrades to pay attention to is that screen and ports. I think those two are the kind of things that I've been wanting for, and Apple have finally answered our questions there. They've nailed it in the park when it comes to other design elements that have been quite outdated for some time, and that includes things like, for example, the FaceTime camera and kind of the speaker system. And I think overall, will I be getting it? Maybe just to try. The design looks really good. Anyway, that's about it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. If you have any questions, pop them down in the comments below. Any comments, like and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next one.